The moment my son Daniel snatched the keys to my brand new BMW, my stomach dropped. He didn't even look me in the eyes when he pressed them into his father-in-law's hand. Instead, he smirked and muttered, "Mom, you're too old for this car." I stood frozen, feeling the sting of his words cut deeper than any insult I had heard before. My neighbors, who had seen me drive proudly into the driveway just days earlier, now watched from across the street, as if witnessing a public shaming. It wasn't only about the car, it was about dignity, respect, and the message my own son was sending me that I no longer deserved what I had worked for all my life. Inside, anger wrestled with heartbreak. Part of me wanted to scream, to rip the keys back, to remind him that every mile of that car had been bought with my sacrifice. Yet another part of me stayed calm. I forced myself to breathe, to let the humiliation wash over me without showing the full depth of my pain. Because what Daniel didn't know was that just 3 days earlier, I had quietly prepared for a betrayal like this. While he and his wife laughed about my age, while his father-in-law boasted about his driving experience, I had already taken steps. Hidden inside that shiny BMW was a military-grade GPS tracker, a little device invisible to the naked eye, but powerful enough to follow every move of my car, no matter where they took it. So, as I stood there watching my son's new hero climb behind the wheel and start the engine, I swallowed my pride. On the surface, it looked like they had won, but deep down I already knew they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. For a year and a half, I lived like someone chasing a quiet dream no one else could see. Every extra shift, every dollar tucked away, every weekend job I took, was a step towards something I had promised myself long ago. At 68, after decades of putting everyone else first, I finally wanted something just for me. And on a cool March morning, I stood in front of a gleaming metallic blue BMW, the car that had lived in the corner of my imagination for years. Price tag, $85,000. To some people, that's just another number on a luxury sticker. To me, it was 18 months of skipped dinners, out late nights of careful budgeting, and the kind of patience only life teaches you. I had always bought used cars, the kind that rattled a little too much when you turned the key. They got me to work, to the grocery store, to parent-teacher meetings and family emergencies, but they were never mine in the sense of choice. They were tools for survival. This BMW was different. This was a symbol that after raising a son, after 45 years of showing up to my job as a security systems technician, I could finally claim something new and shining for myself. I didn't go alone. Carlos, my mechanic and friend for over 20 years, came with me. He had been the one keeping my old sedans alive long past their expiration dates, and I trusted his eye more than my own when it came to engines. He leaned under the hood, ran his hand across the parts with the kind of reverence only mechanics have, and finally nodded with a smile. "Helen," he said, "this car is flawless. With proper care, you'll still be driving it 15 years from now." That moment was more than reassurance, it was validation. When Carlos, who had seen me stretch every dollar on repairs, confirmed this car was as solid as it looked, I knew I wasn't just chasing a vanity dream. I was making an investment in joy and safety, in independence. I counted out the cash I had saved in a special account, dollar after dollar, representing sacrifices no one else had noticed, and I handed it over without hesitation. Sliding into the driver's seat for the first time, the leather still smelled untouched, almost new to the world. I gripped the wheel and felt a rush I hadn't experienced in decades. All those years of watching others enjoy things I denied myself, vacations, new clothes, little luxuries seemed to melt away. For once, I wasn't the mother or the employee or the caretaker. I was just Helen, a woman who had finally given herself permission to enjoy the fruits of her labor. And yet, even in that moment of pure joy, a shadow lingered. I knew the people around me. I knew envy has a way of showing up at family dinners disguised as concern. I knew that sometimes the biggest threats to your peace don't come from strangers, but from the people closest to you. That's why I made one quiet decision that day, a choice that would later prove to be the smartest move I had ever made. Even as I drove my BMW off the lot, a quiet voice inside me reminded me not to be naive. I had spent a lifetime working in security systems, and if that career had taught me anything, it was this. The threats you see are never the ones that hurt you most. The real danger is what comes from the blind spot. 3 days after buying the car, I called up an old friend, Victor. He and I had started out in the same armored transport company back in Chicago. While I had retired, Victor had gone on to run his own private security firm. He was one of those people you trust instantly, half technician, half strategist, and all instinct. When I walked into his office, I didn't bother with small talk. I simply said, "Victor, I need the best you've got. Something invisible. Something no one can tamper with." He smiled knowingly. He had seen me design and install systems for government convoys years ago, and he understood exactly what I was asking. Without hesitation, he led me to a small case on his desk. Inside was a tracker no larger than a deck of cards. "This is military grade," he explained, his voice steady, almost proud. "Runs off its own long-life battery, can't be detected by standard scans, and once it's in, it's there for good. 5 years minimum, no maintenance." We installed it that same afternoon. The placement was so discreet that not even a seasoned mechanic could find it unless they knew the exact coordinates. I drove away with the device silently humming beneath the surface, a digital guardian that would follow my car everywhere it went. But I didn't stop there. I contacted my insurance provider, Allstate, and asked for an extended coverage plan. I paid extra for a clause most people overlook: protection against unauthorized use. That meant if anyone else took the car without my consent, even family, it would count as theft. The agent raised an eyebrow when I insisted on that coverage, but I had learned to trust my gut. To anyone else, it might have seemed paranoid. Why prepare for betrayal before anyone had even laid a hand on my car? But when you've lived as long as I have, you know that foresight is not paranoia, it's survival. I had spent too many years patching up broken systems after the damage was done. This time, I wanted to be ready before the storm hit. At the time, I couldn't have known just how quickly those precautions would become my lifeline. What felt like a small, almost unnecessary step would soon prove to be the only reason I didn't lose everything. It started quietly, the way storms often do. Not with thunder, but with a shift in the air that you only recognize once it's too late. The first hints came at a Sunday dinner, one of those meals that should have been about laughter, family stories, and the smell of roast beef filling the kitchen. Instead, it turned into something else. Daniel sat across from me, cutting into his steak. When he spoke with that casual tone children sometimes use, when they want their words to sting without sounding cruel. Mom, don't you think a car like that is a little much for your age? Maybe you should consider something smaller, safer. His wife, Olivia, smirked almost too quickly and added, Honestly, Helen, luxury cars burn through gas anyway. Wouldn't something more practical make more sense? She delivered it like advice, but her eyes told a different story, sharp, measuring like she was waiting for my reaction. Then came Anthony Olivia's father, a man I barely knew beyond obligatory family gatherings. He leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and nodded as though delivering the final word. Driving at your age takes a toll. Reflexes aren't what they used to be. Experience matters more than speed. Their words landed heavier than they appeared on the surface. They weren't shouting, but the message was clear, you're old. You don't belong behind the wheel of a car like that. To them, I was suddenly fragile, unfit a danger not only to myself, but to others. I should have recognized the warning signs right then. The way Daniel and Olivia exchanged knowing glances, the way Anthony's tone carried a sense of entitlement rather than concern. But I brushed it off, telling myself it was just family being overprotective, even if it was wrapped in condescension. So I smiled tightly and reminded them of the truth. I've been driving for 50 years without a single serious accident. I think I can handle my own car. My voice was steady, but inside I felt the sting of being underestimated. What I didn't see, at least not yet, was that these weren't harmless comments tossed around at the dinner table. They were rehearsals. They were setting the stage for something much bigger, planting seeds of doubt, so that when the time came, they could claim they were only acting in my best interest. At that moment, I chose not to fight. But later, looking back, I realized those smirks and nods weren't concern at all. They were the first cracks in the trust I thought still held our family together. It was a Sunday afternoon when the storm finally broke. The doorbell rang not once, but over and over, the kind of pounding that doesn't wait for permission. When I opened the door, Daniel walked in without a greeting, Olivia trailing behind him with her phone already in hand, recording as if this was some kind of stage performance. And then came Anthony, filling the doorway with his broad shoulders, his face set in that smug confidence I had learned to dread. Daniel planted himself in the middle of my living room, arms crossed, his tone flat and cold. Mom, we've made a decision about your BMW. It's not safe for you anymore. We're here to make sure it goes to someone who can actually handle it. Olivia sat on my couch like it was hers, adjusting the camera on her phone and speaking in a syrupy voice that dripped with false kindness. Helen, this is for your own good. You should feel relieved knowing the car will be in better hands. Anthony has years of experience with luxury vehicles. He knows how to care for them. Anthony stepped closer, laying his heavy hand on my shoulder as if he had the right. You've done well saving for this car, but let's be realistic. At your age, sharp reflexes fade. I've driven for important businessmen for decades. I know exactly how to handle a BMW. His words weren't a suggestion. They were a declaration. I could feel my heart pounding, the weight of humiliation pressing down on me. My own son, the boy I had raised and sacrificed for now, stood united with his wife and father-in-law, to strip me of something I had earned. And to add insult to injury, they were filming it trying to make my surrender look like the responsible choice of a frail old woman. For a moment, I wanted to fight back, to scream that this was theft, not care. But I knew better. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do in a battle is not to strike, but to wait. So I let my shoulders slump. I walked slowly to the table where I kept the keys. My hands trembled not with fear, but with rage I refused to show. I placed the keys in Anthony's outstretched palm, his triumphant grin flashing as Olivia whispered into her phone. "See?" She agreed. They thought they had won. They thought they had broken me. As I watched them walk out laughing and congratulating themselves, I let the tears fall, playing the part they expected. But deep inside, I was already steadying myself. They had no idea I was 10 steps ahead, no clue that every mile that car traveled would be tracked, documented, and waiting to turn their little scheme into their greatest downfall. They believed I had surrendered. The truth was, I was only waiting for the right moment to take everything back. The morning after they drove away with my BMW, I stood in front of the police station with my documents pressed tight against my chest. My hands were shaking, but not from weakness, from the determination that had kept me alive all these years. I walked up to the desk and met Officer Delgado, a young man with sharp eyes and a steady voice. I laid everything out, the registration in my name, the proof of purchase, and the truth that my own son had handed over my car without any legal right. At first, he asked carefully if Daniel might have had some kind of authorization. That's when I placed the paperwork firmly on the desk and said no. This is mine. He had no authority, no permission, and no right. I watched his expression shift as he realized what I already knew. This wasn't a family misunderstanding, it was a crime. But I also knew words can be twisted. Family members can claim you gave something freely. That's why I reached out to my neighbor, Mrs. Rivera. She had seen everything from her balcony, the raised voices, the pressure, the way I handed over the keys like a prisoner obeying orders. When I asked if she would testify, she didn't hesitate. Her voice trembled with anger as she told me, "Helen, what they did was shameful. I'll back you up in any way you need." Still, I wanted more than just a police report. I knew family disputes can get buried under excuses, and I refused to let this one vanish. That afternoon, I went straight to the office of Mark Alvarez, a lawyer I had known for years. He listened quietly as I recounted the entire ordeal. When I showed him the video Olivia had so smugly recorded, his eyes lit up with something close to disbelief. "Helen," he said, "this is gold. They filmed themselves coercing you. No judge will mistake this for consent." Piece by piece, the case began to take shape. Police documentation, a witness willing to stand by me, legal counsel who understood exactly how serious this was. But the most powerful weapon in my corner was still hidden quietly, blinking on my phone. When I opened the GPS tracking app, a red dot appeared on the map. My BMW wasn't lost in some unknown place. It was parked neatly at a workshop on Western Avenue, the kind of garage where secrets are buried under oil stains and fake paperwork. Seeing that dot gave me a sense of calm I hadn't felt in days. They thought they had stolen more than a car. They thought they had stolen my power. What they didn't realize was that every move they made was already being logged, traced, and prepared to lead them straight into their own undoing. That afternoon, I decided to see for myself where the red dot on my phone was leading. The tracker showed my BMW parked at a small repair shop on Western Avenue called Castro Auto, a place I had never been to but had passed enough times to know it wasn't exactly the kind of garage you trusted with a high-end car. My heart pounded as I drove toward it, every block bringing me closer to what I feared and expected all at once. When I arrived, I stayed across the street, blending into the flow of people. From there, I could see Anthony standing near my car, talking animatedly with a mechanic whose greasy hands waved in the air as they discussed something over the hood. I moved closer, careful not to draw attention, and that's when I caught it. Anthony's voice carried firm and impatient. "It's mine now. The old lady can't handle it anymore. I need you to swap the plates. Temporary ones, nothing traceable." The words made my stomach twist. They weren't just using my car, they were trying to erase it, to wipe away the proof that it had ever been mine. I stood there invisible, in plain sight, listening to my dignity being stripped down like the paint on the hood of that car. But instead of crumbling, something shifted inside me. I pulled out my phone, opened the contacts, and called Officer Delgado. My voice was steady when I told him exactly what I was seeing my son's father-in-law attempting to disguise my BMW with false identification. His response was immediate. "Do not confront them, Helen. Stay put. This changes everything. If their altering plates were no longer dealing with just misappropriation, this is a felony. Forgery. Aggravated theft." I hung up and watched Anthony gesture at the mechanic, his arrogance on full display, as if he believed no one in the world could touch him. For the first time since they had taken the car, I felt a different kind of power rising in me. The pain of being humiliated in my own living room was still there, but now it was joined by a sharper, stronger determination. Because in that moment I realized they hadn't stolen my future, they had handed me evidence. Evidence that would not only bring my car back, but expose every lie, every sneer, every manipulation they had used against me. From grief and humiliation, I had moved into clarity. I was no longer the victim in their story. I was about to become the author of their downfall. That evening, just as I was setting my phone down on the kitchen counter, it lit up with Daniel's name. For a second, I considered ignoring it, but a part of me wanted to hear how he would explain himself after everything I had uncovered. I answered, and his voice came through tight, almost frantic. "Mom, can we please talk? Don't do this. Don't take it to the police. We can fix this as a family." I let him speak, listening to the tremor in his words. This wasn't the confident son who had strutted through my living room, arms crossed like a judge handing down a sentence. This was the sound of someone who had realized, maybe for the first time, that his actions carried real consequences. But I wasn't about to let guilt or desperation blur the truth. I kept my tone calm, almost too calm. "Daniel, the only way this ends outside a courtroom is if you return my car immediately and make a public apology for what you did. Anything less is not enough." There was silence on the other end. I could almost hear his thoughts racing, searching for another angle, another excuse, another way to convince me to back down. Then he tried again. "Mom, you're overreacting. You gave Anthony the keys. Everyone saw it. Olivia even recorded it. There's no crime here." That's when I cut him off. "Do not insult my intelligence. That video shows coercion, not consent. And you know it. You raised your voice, you pressured me, you humiliated me, and then you let someone else drive away with what I worked my whole life to buy. Don't tell me it was my choice. His breathing grew heavier. The confidence was gone, replaced with panic. Please, Mom. This doesn't have to go that far. We're family. Family. That word, so casually dropped, felt like another slap in the face. Where was family when they backed me into a corner in my own home? Where was family when they turned my sacrifice into a spectacle for a phone camera? I let him sit in his own silence before answering. Daniel, family doesn't strip you of your dignity and call it love. Family doesn't steal from you and expect gratitude. If you want to do right by me, you know exactly what you need to do. Bring the car back and face the shame you created. Otherwise, the courts will handle what you refuse to admit. I hung up before he could reply, setting the phone down with a steady hand. For the first time in days, I felt the balance shift. I wasn't the one cornered anymore. I was the one drawing the line. The day I walked into the courthouse, I carried more than papers. I carried weeks of humiliation, betrayal, and determination. Judge Ramirez, a woman known in Chicago for her firm stance on family abuse cases, reviewed the documents in front of her, the police report, Mrs. Rivera's statement, and the video Olivia had so foolishly recorded. She took her time, her eyes narrowing as she replayed the key moments. Then she looked up at me and said with crisp certainty, "This is clear evidence of coercion. I will sign the order for immediate recovery." In less than 2 hours, the wheels of justice turned faster than I expected. A recovery order went out to every police unit in the state. My BMW was no longer just a stolen vehicle. It was a case backed by the full force of the law. That same afternoon, I stood beside Officer Delgado and 2 other officers as we walked into Castro Auto. The scene felt like something out of a movie. My car was lifted on a hydraulic platform and there was Anthony standing over it while the mechanic wrestled with fake license plates. Chicago police, one officer shouted, flashing the court order, "Step away from the vehicle. This BMW has been reported stolen." The room froze. The mechanic dropped his tools with a metallic clang. Anthony's face drained of color. For a brief second, he tried to stammer out excuses, but the cuffs were already clicking around his wrists. Delgado's voice was steady as he read the charges: receiving stolen property, attempted forgery, aggravated theft. The mechanic was taken, too, caught with the original plates and fraudulent paperwork. And then, after weeks of watching others drive away with my dignity, the keys were handed back to me. Sliding into the driver's seat, I ran my hand over the wheel. The familiar leather felt different this time, comforting but scarred just like me. The car still purred when I started it, yet the smell of cigarettes lingered. The dashboard carried scratches and empty wrappers littered the floor. As I drove away from that garage, relief washed over me, but so did a bitter truth. Yes, I had my BMW back, but no mother should ever have to retrieve her peace of mind from a courtroom in a police raid. The road ahead was mine again, but the family I thought I could trust had left damage far deeper than the dents and stains inside that car. Just when I thought the humiliation couldn't get any deeper, it found a new stage: social media. One morning, my neighbor, Mrs. Rivera, called in outrage. "Helen, you won't believe what Olivia has posted. You need to see it right now. I opened Facebook, and there it was. Picture after picture of Anthony grinning beside my BMW as if it had always been his. In one photo, he dangled my keys proudly in front of the hood. The caption read, "Finally a car, worthy of Anthony's experience. Some people waste luxury. We know how to make it shine." Another shot showed him settled into the driver's seat, one arm draped casually over the wheel. The words below stung like salt on a wound. Not like certain older drivers who only use it for grocery trips. This car finally has a real driver. But the worst one, the one that made my hands shake with both fury and disbelief, was a picture of Anthony and Olivia clinking champagne glasses inside the BMW. Her caption was smug, almost celebratory. "Here's to upgrades in life. No more wasted cars in weak hands." The comments rolled in quickly. Friends and acquaintances congratulated Anthony, some writing well-deserved and about time. Others, who knew just enough of the story, asked uneasy questions. One woman typed, "Wasn't that Helen's car? How did Anthony get it?" Olivia brushed it off with a vague response trying to twist the truth. I felt sick reading it, but I didn't panic. Instead, I took screenshot after screenshot, capturing every word, every smirk, every so-called toast. Because what Olivia had done without realizing it was gift-wrap the perfect evidence. Those posts weren't just cruel mockery. They were a public confession. Proof that Anthony had taken possession of something that was never his. Proof that they knew exactly what they were doing and thought they'd get away with it. Later, when I showed those screenshots to my lawyer, Mark, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Helen, this isn't just evidence. This is them incriminating themselves in writing for the world to see. You don't have to prove intent anymore. They already broadcasted it." In trying to shame me publicly, they had done the opposite. They had documented their own crime. After the police returned my BMW, I thought the worst was behind me. But when I slid into the driver's seat and began to really look around, the truth came spilling out from every corner of the car. The once pristine leather was burned by a cigarette. The dashboard had scratches I knew weren't there before. The glove compartment held gas station receipts showing miles I hadn't driven, hundreds of them. I pulled up the car's GPS history, and what I found turned my stomach. In just 4 days, they had put more than 1,200 miles on my car. The tracker showed stops at 3 different used car dealerships, including one all the way up in Milwaukee. My hands clenched at the phone as I realized what it meant. They hadn't just taken my car to enjoy it. They were shopping it around like a cheap prize, trying to unload it for quick cash. And then the real bombshell dropped. A week later, I got a call from a woman named Mariana Lopez, a sales manager at a dealership in Milwaukee. She had tracked me down after seeing the car flagged in the police database. Her voice was firm but kind. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "Anthony came here last Tuesday claiming he owned a metallic blue BMW. He wanted to sell it urgently for $55,000. The problem was the paperwork he brought in was a forgery." She sent me copies of those documents, and my blood ran cold. There it was. My name scribbled across the bill of sale, but the signature wasn't mine. It was a shaky imitation, the kind of thing a con artist thinks will pass if no one looks too closely. They hadn't just stolen my car. They had stolen my identity. When I showed everything to my lawyer, Mark, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. Helen, this is no longer just theft. This is identity fraud and large-scale attempted fraud. They weren't planning to borrow your car. They were planning to erase you from it completely and pocket the profit, the scratches, the receipts, the miles on the odometer. They weren't just careless signs of use. They were breadcrumbs, each one pointing to a plan that went deeper than I had imagined. They wanted to turn my life savings into their payday, and they were willing to sign my name in ink to do it. But what they forgot is that lies leave trails. And this time, every mile, every receipt, every forged signature was leading straight back to them. I thought the forged documents were the peak of betrayal, but the real unraveling came when the police dug deeper. Officer Delgado called me back to the station with updates that left me reeling. On his desk sat a stack of printed WhatsApp messages, each one a blow to my chest. They weren't from strangers or distant criminals. They were between Daniel and Anthony. In black and white, my own son was plotting my downfall. One message from Anthony read, "The old lady won't notice until it's too late. By then, the car will already have a new identity." Daniel replied without hesitation, "Perfect. In a week, we'll have 50,000 clean dollars, and she'll have no idea how to get it back." Reading those words felt like swallowing glass. This wasn't carelessness. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was premeditated, cold calculated. The boy I had carried in my arms, the man I thought still had a heart, was the architect of the entire scheme. And the hits kept coming. The mechanic from Castro Auto had confessed under questioning. He admitted Anthony promised him $5,000 to swap the plates and fix the papers. That detail alone turned a dirty favor into evidence of a full conspiracy. Then came the final nail Anthony's record, a prior conviction for fraud back in 2019. He wasn't just a desperate father-in-law caught in a bad decision. He was a repeat offender, an opportunist who saw me as his next target. But nothing compared to the moment I realized Daniel wasn't dragged into this. He had let it. He used my trust, my age, and my silence as tools to execute a crime he believed I was too weak to fight. I walked out of the station that day in shock, but also with my eyes wide open. Betrayal by blood cuts the deepest, but it also strips away illusions. My son had chosen greed over loyalty, and in doing so he had exposed not only his own moral collapse, but the fragility of the ties I thought were unbreakable. The legal case was no longer just about a stolen BMW. It was about a conspiracy with layers of lies, forged documents, and betrayal, planned down to the last dollar. And now the law had everything it needed to peel back those layers one by one. By the time the legal storm reached its peak, I knew one thing for certain: if I didn't act fast, my hard-earned savings would remain at risk. It wasn't just about my BMW anymore. It was about protecting the very foundation of my life from people who had proven they saw me as a bank account instead of a mother. The first step was the bank. For 12 years, Daniel had held a power of attorney that allowed him access to my accounts in case of emergency. At the time, it felt practical. Now, it felt like handing him the keys to my future. Sitting across from the bank manager, I signed the papers to revoke that authority once and for all. She scanned my file, frowned, and quietly informed me that Daniel had been pulling money from a supplemental savings account, $15,000, over the last 5 years, siphoned without my knowledge. My chest tightened, but I didn't flinch. That era was over. I ordered every account moved sealed and placed solely under my control. Next was insurance. For nearly a decade, I had been paying over $3,000 a year to cover Daniel and Olivia's private health policy. I thought I was helping them build stability. But after what they had done, the idea of continuing to shoulder their security while they tore down mine was unbearable. I called the provider and canceled it immediately. Their coverage would end within the month. Finally, I went to see my notary. My will had been written years earlier, leaving 60% of my estate to Daniel. I had imagined a son who would honor that gift, not a man who would try to steal it early through deceit. Sitting at that old oak desk, I signed a new will. Daniel's share was reduced to the bare legal minimum, 5%. The rest would be divided between a niece who had always shown me kindness, a foundation supporting seniors defrauded by their families, and a trust set aside for my own care. As the ink dried, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and liberation. The ripple effects were immediate. Daniel lost his job after word spread about the investigation. With no salary and no insurance, he and Olivia began to drown in overdue bills. Then came the letter from their mortgage lender. Foreclosure proceedings had begun. Without my guarantee, and with their finances collapsing, they were about to lose the very house they thought they had secured through manipulation. Cutting those ties hurt. A mother doesn't dream of stripping her child from her will or leaving him to face eviction. But family loyalty cannot excuse betrayal. Sometimes love means drawing a line so firm it can never be crossed again. And for me, shutting off the financial valve wasn't just an act of defense. It was the first real breath of freedom I'd taken in years. For weeks, I believed Daniel was the one who had betrayed me most deeply. He was my son, after all, the one who turned cold and cruel in my living room and handed my car over like it was his to give away. But when the prosecutor placed a fresh stack of evidence on the table, the picture became painfully clear. Daniel wasn't the architect. He was just a pawn. The true mastermind had been standing beside him all along. Olivia. Her WhatsApp conversations with friends were chilling. In them, she mocked me for being too old to handle such a powerful car and bragged that all it would take was pressing the right buttons, reminding me of my age, questioning my reflexes, planting seeds of fear. She laid out the plan like a strategist, instructing Daniel to pressure me, using Anthony's experience as a weapon, and filming the entire ordeal to make it appear consensual. But what broke me wasn't just her cold words. It was the discovery that her pregnancy wasn't a coincidence. According to medical records, she had stopped using contraception just as she began pushing the plan forward. To her, carrying a child wasn't just about family. It was a shield, a weapon she could brandish if the scheme went wrong, a way to force sympathy to soften the law's hand. When investigators revealed this, my heart sank in a way I hadn't thought possible. Every move had been calculated, every smile, every word of reassurance, every sweet tone she used while recording me. It was all theater, a mask, hiding the mind of someone who saw manipulation as survival. The day she was arrested, word spread quickly. Neighbors peered out from their porches as officers led her away in handcuffs. her belly visible beneath her coat, her eyes darting desperately for anyone who might step in. Daniel shouted, begged, tried to paint her as misunderstood, but the truth was already out. Olivia wasn't the supportive wife caught in a storm. She was the storm. Watching her be taken away, I felt an odd mix of emotions. Relief. Yes, because the curtain had finally been pulled back and the director of my humiliation exposed. But also sorrow, because the conspiracy wasn't born of strangers. It was crafted at my own family table, woven by the very woman who married into it. The betrayal cut deeper than theft ever could. A stolen car can be replaced, but the knowledge that someone planned a pregnancy and used motherhood as a disguise to orchestrate my downfall, that wound may never fully close. When the dust finally settled, the ripple effects of their choices came crashing down on each of them. Daniel lost his job permanently. His employer wanted nothing to do with a man facing charges of fraud and conspiracy. The steady paycheck, the company car, the benefits he once boasted about were all gone overnight. The son who thought he was securing a better future by stripping me of mine was now standing at the edge of financial ruin. Anthony's fate was even harsher. His past caught up with him, and this time there was no escape. With prior fraud on his record, the courts showed no leniency. He was sentenced to prison, his reputation as a professional driver destroyed. Every company that once trusted him now saw only a criminal who tried to launder stolen property. His arrogance on the day he grabbed my car keys had turned into desperation behind bars. And Olivia, the woman who thought she could script every move, even using her own pregnancy as a shield, faced the most devastating blow. Evidence showed she had masterminded the plan, and no sympathetic excuse could erase that. The court charged her as the intellectual author of the crime, and the weight of that responsibility meant years of consequences she never imagined. As for me, I got my BMW back. But more than that, I got something far more important, my dignity. Driving that car again wasn't just about the leather seats or the smooth engine. It was about reclaiming what they had tried to take away the right, to enjoy the fruits of my labor, the respect for a lifetime of sacrifice, the pride of knowing I was not as weak or naive as they believed. This experience taught me a truth that too many ignore. Family is not a free pass for betrayal. Being related by blood or marriage does not excuse crimes. Love, loyalty, and respect cannot coexist with manipulation and theft. Family bonds are sacred only when they're built on trust. When that trust is broken, the law must step in. I share this story because I want others, especially older parents and grandparents, to know they are not powerless. Age does not make you invisible. Experience, wisdom, and the courage to act can protect what is yours. And sometimes standing up to those closest to you is the only way to remind the world and yourself that your dignity is not negotiable. In the end, they lost their freedom, their jobs, and their illusions of control. I kept my car, my independence, and most importantly, my self-respect. Justice wasn't just about punishing them, it was about proving that even in the face of betrayal, dignity can be reclaimed, and no one, not even your own family, has the right to take it away. If this story has taught me anything, it's that preparation is not paranoia, it's survival. Betrayal often comes quietly from people you'd never expect, and by the time it shows itself, the damage can feel irreversible. But there are steps you can take, and I want to share them with anyone who might find themselves in a similar position. Think of it as a 7-point checklist for protecting your dignity, your assets, and your peace of mind. 1. GPS tracking. Install a discreet device in your car or valuables. It can turn despair into evidence and give you leverage when you feel powerless. 2. Insurance. Backup. Never rely on "it won't happen to me." Comprehensive insurance may look like another bill, but in a crisis it becomes your lifeline. 3. Trusted witnesses. Keep good relationships with neighbors and friends. When conflict comes, a neutral witness can mean the difference between a story dismissed and a story believed. 4. Social media receipts. Screenshots matter. When arrogance spills online, capture it. Posts vanish, but proof lasts. 5. Legal counsel. Find a lawyer before you think you need one. Someone who understands not just the law, but your vulnerability can be the wall between you and exploitation. 6. Court orders. Don't be afraid of the legal system. Judges exist to protect rights even when the people threatening them share your last name. 7. Financial control. Revisit your account's insurance policies and wills. Make sure access is earned, not assumed. What's yours should stay yours until you decide otherwise. I share this list not because I want others to live in fear, but because I've lived through the reality of being caught unprepared. I had to fight to get my car, my savings, and my dignity back. If my story can keep even one person from facing the same heartbreak, then it has meaning beyond my own scars. And here's what I'll leave you with if one day the keys to your freedom, your security, or your independence were suddenly torn from your hands. What would you do? Would you stay silent, or would you fight to take them back?